Welcome back to our podcast. Today, we are talking about understanding executive function challenges in individuals with ADHD and autism. In today's episode, we will dive a bit deeper into the concepts of executive function and how it relates to ADHDers and autistic folk.
Yep, awesome. I'm happy to get into it.
Oh yeah, it's a fun topic.
It is.
So what exactly is executive function? Executive function is a set of cognitive processes that help us to manage, plan, and organize information in a nutshell. These skills are essential for everyday tasks, like all the things that we do. They help us make decisions. They help us to focus our attention, regulate our emotions. However, ADHDers and autistic folk, we often struggle with some of this stuff, and some of it is like the less talked about parts of autism and ADHD. Today, though, we're going to sort of look more towards cognitive flexibility, stress tolerance, and metacognition, and we'll dip in and out of inner and outer world domains of human development while we talk about this.
Yep. Yeah.
So, Caitlin, can you maybe walk us through why executive function is important to acknowledge in the therapeutic space?
Yeah, so I think it's really important for us to get a good understanding of why we're addressing executive functioning issues, particularly in a podcast that is neurodivergent affirming. So I think it's really important to acknowledge a lot of the challenges that our clients have, our autistic ADHD clients have, because often they've experienced a lot of negative labels towards them because of some of these executive functioning challenges. And often a lot of these messages can be really internalized, thinking that they're lazy or they're unmotivated, and all there's a plethora of other labels that people use, and it much like we were talking about in January, it does impact self-esteem and it impacts self-perception. So I think for a lot of the clients that I work with, when they hear, hey, like, this is a struggle, this isn't something that you're choosing to do, this isn't a character flaw, and hey, a lot of other people like you have these struggles as well, I think it really helps to shift a lot of negative thinking and negative perceptions towards themselves. And also, if they choose, there's a lot of different strategies that can be used to support them to in their executive functioning, so that they're feeling less stressed and overwhelmed on a day-to-day basis, and they feel more empowered in their day and in their life. So I think that those are a lot of the reasons why it's important. Is there anything that you wanted to add, Teena?
Well, I love your choice of words there around if they choose, because you're right. Like we can only put our mental energy, our emotional energy, and our time into so many different things. And yeah, when you look at all of the different things that you could be looking at, working on, improving, and all the rest of it, you get to choose. You get to choose what matters to you as a person and what isn't so important. And I love that. If you choose.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess that's very much how I practice as well. It's all about choice. And if that's something that my clients want to work on, great. If not, I'm sure there's other things that we can work on together.
Yeah. So I love talking about the brain. It's just my special interest.
You have one too.
Hey,
you have one.
Yeah, I do.
It's so funny. Sorry, I just thought I have this little, I don't have it here with me, it's in my office. I have this little brain model that I got from Kmart. And sometimes I use it during psycho ed in my sessions, and I'll be like, just wait a minute, I've got a brain. And then I come back and I'm like, well, I have a brain, but I also have this brain.
My model brain.
Yeah, my model brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so the prefrontal cortex of the brain is what is chiefly responsible for these executive functions. This area is located right at the very front of the brain, and it acts kind of like a conductor, where it oversees the and guiding of many of the cognitive processes that enable us to function effectively in our daily lives, like the way we want to. And it's crucial for high level tasks such as, managing time, paying attention, switching focus, planning, organizing, and like remembering details, like working memory, and controlling impulses. That's a really important one for us ADHDers. So this conductor may not perform as effectively sometimes, which is when it leads to having challenges with executive function. And how challenging that is can vary from person to person.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, autistic folks and ADHDers have executive functioning challenges. There's been research conducted that's shown that there's actually differences in brain structure for autistic folks, like specifically in the regions that deal with executive functioning, such as the prefrontal cortex. So structural differences and also connectivity differences between that part of the brain and other parts of the brain. Is it similar for ADHDers?
Yes, it is. And I find this research really, really interesting because at the moment, we don't have any sort of, like testings or things like that kind of show these differences, but there is a lot of research into like brain imagery where there is some evidence emerging that our brains do have that different structure, which I think is kind of cool. I like it. It's like, I think of it like architecture. I think I really like the Victorian era and sort of the like medieval architecture. And I just imagine that, yeah, my brain is just structured differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it a medieval or is it Victorian era or both?
I don't know, maybe both. Yeah. Really old stuff.
Sorry?
Really old stuff.
Really old stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought too much about what kind of aesthetic my brain would be. But I guess another thing to mention as well, that someone who's an autistic ADHD, again, would probably have, a different kind of brain as well. And within people, there's brain differences as well. So yeah, so it's really interesting to look at, I guess, the science behind these things.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that there is research being done here, and it's really cool and interesting.
Yeah.
So if we think about cognitive flexibility, like one of those executive functions that we were talking about, so this refers to the ability to switch between tasks or thoughts, easily and without too much stress. Individuals like ADHDers and autistic folk, sometimes we have difficulty switching our attention from one task to another, which can either cause difficulty in getting tasks, projects, whatever, completed, but it can also cause dysregulation. I mean, I know me personally, this is something I really, really struggle with, even down to don't ask me what are we having for dinner and then ask me where's my school uniform. Like they're worlds apart, and I need transition time to switch my brain. And in a more sort of serious sense, if I'm trying to work on something and I'm having to, those constant interruptions, that can start to become really dysregulating, causing feelings of agitation and, frustration, which it's not nice. It takes a bit to come down from that.
Yeah. And I think that just makes me think of, I guess, the importance of recognizing that in the therapeutic context, because I'm an ADHDer. So when I first started my practice, sometimes I can talk quick and I'll kind of have those double-barreled questions. And some of my clients are like, hey, Caitlin, like, it's a bit overwhelming when you're like asking me all these questions, or, can you please explain that a bit slower for me so my brain can kind of wrap around that. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm so sorry. So I try to be really conscious of that now, that of myself and how I am communicating and conveying information, and making sure that it's being conveyed in a way that the other person is able to process it.
Yeah. And if I think about the way our schools are set up, more specifically high school, for our young ADHDers and autistic folk who are in high school, you go from one class, you're there for 50 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever it is, and then you go to another class. And thinking about that cognitive flexibility, when there's not much time in between going from like math to art class, for example, that can be so stressful, having to sort of disengage from this topic and then re-engage in a new subject matter. And yeah, like that can cause a lot of stress.
Then if you're an autistic person, when you're going in between the classes, you have to deal with all the sensory overwhelm of like kids like walking and talking and yelling and carrying on. So that's awesome. So you don't even get a break to regulate yourself before you go to the classroom, the next classroom.
Yeah. And then like worse luck, every single class you go to, there's someone saying, like, so how is everybody? How did you enjoy your school holidays? And it's just like, oh, I can't answer this question again.
Yeah. So speaking of sensory processing, so particularly for autistic folks, sensory processing differences can really impact on executive functioning. Because it results in issues with cognitive overload. So, if you're in a shopping center and you're in the aisle and you're trying to decide what you want for dinner, and your brain is getting distracted by the bright lights and the noises and the smells and all this sort of thing, it can be really difficult to focus and to rely on your executive functioning to make those choices and decisions when your brain's being distracted by all of this sensory information. And also it can impact on behavioral regulation as well. So, the more sensory information that your brain and your body's trying to process, you're trying to make a decision, and then you're getting more and more dysregulated, and then you might have a meltdown in the middle of the shops because you're just like, I can't cope with this environment, I can't make a decision, this is really frustrating, but I can't get out of this situation because I need to make a decision because I need to eat. So it's just like this horrible situation. But yeah, like obviously there's things that we can do in those instances. We can put in some of those accommodations, for our sensory stuff. But I guess that's an example of, I guess, something that I've experienced before.
Yeah. And well, you can't start to make accommodations until you understand what's going on and how it all connects. And if executive function and the different components of that are left out of the conversation, then you're really missing an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, definitely.
So in the example you gave there, it sounded really stressful, which is a great segue onto the next part, which is about stress tolerance.
Oh,
well done. So stress tolerance, this is referring to the ability to manage and cope with stresses effectively. And, quite often we can experience heightened levels of stress due to our executive function challenges. Like especially things like managing time and tasks, having to be organized, and then like you referenced before, those self-esteem, when all of these components are at play, stress can get really high quite quickly. And when we're living with constantly high levels of cortisol, we're always in this varying levels of survival mode, just trying to get through. We know some of the health implications for living with chronic stress. It's not great.
Something that's really important to think about in terms of stress and its impact on executive functioning is some of the social factors. So there's been research that's shown that stigma and lack of understanding can significantly affect mental health and well-being, leading to anxiety and stress, which impacts on cognitive flexibility, such as what we were talking about before. So it's really important to think about a lot of these challenges, like they are, there's those brain differences, but also there's environmental factors that can impact on people's experience of executive functioning challenges. And having people around us that are understanding and supportive of that can help us to have healthier self-esteem and better mental health, so that we can enjoy the executive functioning that we have, instead of it being used up with all these other things.
Yeah. And you were saying about how stress impacts like cognitive flexibility and things like that. And when we're stressed, we can't think clearly. We struggle with like self-control, impulsivity, emotional impulsivity even. And so what's happening is even with just mild stress, our prefrontal cortex is being flooded with like different brain chemicals, which can send our brain offline. And it also disrupts the communication between the different brain areas. So yeah, like we're putting all of our mental energy into essentially just trying to be okay, and get through the shopping center or deciding what we're having for dinner. And yeah, like it can be really intense, I think. And we do tend to minimize it a lot, I think, just as people, the different things that cause the really high stress. And when we can break it down to components of executive function, where it's like, okay, so me personally, my working memory is like horrendous, and learning that, like trying to remember a phone number is really bad. There's too many numbers there. So learning that my working memory is not very good at all, I can take the pressure off myself being expected to remember a string of numbers or even a few instructions. So just write it down. Just ask for it to be written down. Stop trying to remember stuff that you can't remember. And brings the stress levels right back down quite quickly.
Yeah, and I really, those two things. Actually, that's something that I do when I'm talking with my clients. If I have like a few different thoughts about what they're talking about, I'll be like, okay, I have 3 thoughts about that, so that I remember that those 3 things, so I can go back. But also, like, I think it's really important to model those sorts of things in session and be like, oh, hey, I've just got to go grab a notepad so that I can write that down so I don't forget. And hey, like, I'll send you an email later with it all, so you can reference back to it later. Like that. I think something that was also really important to acknowledge is that when you were talking about how a lot of executive functioning goes into trying to emotionally regulate and to cope with that stress response, and I think that's a big part of what isn't acknowledged. Like I have a lot of clients who they come to me and they say, I go, look, I think you're experiencing burnout. And they're like, well, I'm just sitting there on the couch scrolling on TikTok. Like, I'm not doing anything. And I'm like, yeah, but you're burning through like a ton of mental energy, and having that stress in your body. Our body has to take energy to be able to process that. Like, it's not just this magic thing that happens. And often we're in our minds stressing about all these, different things. So I think, from the outside looking in, someone can go, oh, well, you're sitting on the couch doing nothing. But inside, someone's really struggling. And that stress and those, like, the ruminating thoughts or those worries about the future or what they need to do is chewing up their executive functioning.
Yeah. It's I like the those Facebook, Instagram memes that sort of remind us that you can't ever really know what's going on for someone on the inside. They might present all fine and dandy, which is something that a lot of ADHDers and autistic folk get very good at, presenting as all great, everything's happy and well. But yeah, stresses that seem really insignificant, like why can't my brain retain, a 2-part instruction, or, 3 points, whatever. Like it's frustrating. It's so frustrating. For ADHDers, the whole, I guess, joke of misplacing things. Yeah, sometimes it's fun, and it's it can sort of produce a laugh, but for the person, for the ADHD who is the one that is constantly misplacing things and losing things, it is so frustrating and stressful. Being given a gift and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm really scared that I'm going to lose this. That's a stress.
Yeah, I even remember, like, when was it? It's probably like in year 5 or something like that, and we had to learn our times tables off by heart. Still haven't done that, by the way. Also,
Me either.
Doesn't really matter because luckily I don't really have to do times tables within my job and calculators. There was also, I don't know, I think there was like this autistic part of me that was like, there's calculators, so like why do we have to learn it off by heart? Like we can just use a calculator. But like, just like, I remember being in school and stuff, and there was this expectation that I could learn and recite my times tables. And like back then I didn't know I had ADHD, but I just knew, I was like, I can't do this. Like I just can't, like my brain can't retain this. And like I still to this day, like my working memory, I really struggle with, and I can't do maths in my head. Like I just can't. I can do lots of other things, but that's just something I can't, I really can't do. But the thing is that, you internalize that because there's this expectation that you should be able to do that. So if you can't do that, then you must be stupid, or dumb. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, I can't do that, and that's okay. But there's a lot of really other cool, like there's a lot of cool stuff that I can do that a lot of people can't do as well. So, not everyone's going to be good at everything, and that's okay. And I find accepting some of those challenges and either letting go of it, sometimes just letting go of those expectations and being like, well, I don't care that I can't do maths in my head, and then putting in those accommodations and those strategies, so that I can function in my day-to-day life.
I completely agree, and you're right. What's the need to remember math equations when we have our calculators in our mobile phones now?
Yes. Well, exactly. These, like, now it's in our phones. We don't even need like a whole separate calculator
Yeah.
anymore.
Exactly. Thank you, technology.
So something that I think is really important to think about when it comes to executive functioning challenges is the culture that people live in. So depending on the kind of culture that you live in, there may be more or less of a burden on your executive functioning, and there may be more or less acceptance around accommodations for those executive functioning challenges. So, if you're working in a capitalist society, there can often be a big focus on productivity, and it's just go, go, go. And, you're meant to work and have kids and, have a great gym board and, tick all the boxes and everything. Like, you have to do it all. And so I think, particularly in the work context, a lot of autistic folks and ADHDs that have executive functioning challenges, it can be really hard because it's go, go, go at work, and then they've used up all their executive functioning spoons for the day, and then they get home and then there's nothing left for themselves and their family. So it's really important to take, I guess, a look at your workplace or the society that you're living in, and having a look and going, oh, is this actually a really good fit for me? I guess it's important to consider whether it's that you have significant executive functioning challenges, or that the expectations put upon your executive functioning is the issue. So, like at a baseline, an autistic ADHD is probably going to have executive functioning challenges, but there's going to be certain cultures and environments that are going to be supportive of that, or not be as taxing. And unfortunately, in those kind of capitalist society structures, there are massive executive functioning demands.
Yeah, that is very, very true. Yeah, like there is so much, because it's such a busy lifestyle, busy society. Even just asking for a really simple accommodation, like can you just give me a minute? I'm just going to write this down so I don't forget, like that can sometimes be perceived as really burdensome. It's like, oh, I don't have time for you to take notes on what I'm asking you to do. It's like, well, okay, it's not going to get done then. That's on you.
Yeah. Like I remember, like when, like I have my own business now, so I can like put in so many strategies and accommodations for myself. It's awesome. But when I used to work for others, and you have all these demands, like you have to see a certain amount of clients and do a certain amount of reports and KPIs and da 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 da, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like I'm trying so hard, but it's just a lot. And I'd be driving home with a migraine because my brain was just like fried.
Yeah.
All of the executive functioning demands. I mean, there was other stuff too, but yeah, it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Open plan offices.
Oh, the
The interruptions, cognitive flexibility. OMG. What a nightmare.
Yeah, absolute nightmare. Oh,
Sensory
yeah.
overload. Oh, so
Or hot
much.
desking. Oh,
Oh, yeah. Hot desking. That is an absolute
I
autistic
need
nightmare.
it is. I need my desk. I need it set up in a particular way, and no one can touch my stuff.
Yep. I need my chair set up in a particular way. I need the air conditioning directed on me in a certain way.
A certain
Yeah.
like speed. Yep.
Yes.
Certain temperature.
Oh, but
Yeah.
if we move on to metacognition, or the ability to reflect on and evaluate our own thoughts, and how this actually plays a vital role in executive function. So we often have difficulty assessing our strengths and challenges accurately, which can then impact our ability to self-regulate and other things. Yeah, it's especially around, like for me, time perception. I have a list that is called How Long, and I literally write things down on this list. Everyday tasks. How long does it take me to do these tasks? Because when I'm really stressed, I just cannot work that out, or be reasonable with my time allocations.
Yeah.
And when I have put too many things on my to-do list and not allocated enough time, or whatever, like I haven't given myself enough time to get to an appointment, that really impacts my ability to self-regulate. Yeah, it's difficult.
And that's an awesome strategy. Like something that I recommend for my clients is that if they're struggling with time perception, to maybe for a week or two, actually record how long things are taking them, because then it helps to kind of recalibrate their time perception of particular tasks. And even for myself, I used to have a to-do list, but now I actually put tasks in my calendar, and I'll record how long it's taking and things like that, and that's been really helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good strategy. I like that.
Thanks.
I might steal that one.
So something I wanted to touch on, I found some really interesting research. So Willard et al.'s 2021 study found perceived difficulties in social anxiety and executive functioning may have a direct impact on the self-perceived social and work functioning of autistic folks. Interestingly, performance-based measures of executive function did not show a significant relationship with social or work functioning. I thought that was really interesting, because it just goes to show that the way that we feel about our executive functioning challenges can actually impact on our executive functioning performance as opposed to actual measures of executive functioning. And I think it's also really important to consider that a lot of the research in the past has been around objective measures of autistic folks and ADHDers experiences. And it's only in the last few years that there's been a lot more qualitative research where there's been that subjective experience captured. So it's really important that when working with an autistic or ADHDer, we're not just kind of doing these standardized tests, that we're also looking to be curious to understand their perceptions of themselves and their experiences. And we don't want to just kind of put people in pigeonholes. We want to understand their unique experience and not just kind of go, oh, well, you're an autistic person, so this is what's happening for you, or you're an ADHDer, so this is what's happening. We really need to listen to the people that we're working with.
Yeah, that's a really good point and a really interesting article, because what we think of ourselves is sometimes more important than what's the actual challenges that we do have.
Thank you to everyone for joining us for our 5th episode. In case you haven't noticed, we've probably started to get weirder and weirder, and I I assume as we do more episodes we'll get more comfortable and get a bit weirder, but that's fine. I guess we want to just be our true authentic selves, and hopefully along the way we'll find our people and the people that resonate with us and our story and our work. So we really appreciate the time that you take to listen to our podcasts, and hopefully you'll continue to listen to us. If you haven't listened to our previous podcasts, I'd really recommend it, especially our episode 0 podcast, because it gives a lot of context to a lot of what we talk about in these episodes.